Hello, I'm Matt and welcome to Badger Workshop. One of the first things I did when I moved into the house was get this new boiler fitted. Ever since then it's been on my job list to make a cabinet for it, so I thought I'd finally get that one done. I'm going to start by making a framework to box it in, and I've got all these scraps of 2x3 that I'm going to use up for it. I get them all cut down to size using the miter saw, and then I can start getting the frames put together. I'm making two. As this is going in the corner, I just need one for one side and one for the front, and these can just get screwed together, nothing fancy. I need a way to attach these to the walls, so I'm going to drill some 4mm holes through this wood. I can take the frames back to the boiler now, offer them up, and then get a drill with a 4mm masonry bit in, put it through the holes and mark out where the holes in the wall need to go. I then use a larger bit to drill out a hole for the plug and get that installed. Now I get a screw put through the frame into the plug and everything screwed in tight. I can now pivot the frame on that top screw to get everything lined up and then repeat the process of marking the holes, drilling them out, getting the plugs in and getting it all screwed on. After I've got this first frame on, I then do exactly the same thing for the second one. With both frames up, they then need attaching together, so I hold them in place with one of these new clamps I was sent. I can then get some screws in to tie them all together. That's the framework done. Now I need to make some panels to go on it. I have all these boards of planed all round pine that I'm going to use, but first I'm going to rip them down to make up some panels. Doing this will make them lighter, and it means I can get more out of the material I have. I want to get 3 panels glued up, one for the side and enough for 2 doors to go on the front. I get the strips positioned on some parallel clamps, get a bead of glue put along and spread out, and then clamped up. To keep them level, I'm going to use some scraps of wood and some of these incredibly strong spring clamps I have. I only had enough for one side, so on the other side I used the other new clamps I got. I'll put a link down below to who sent me these, because I'm quite impressed with them so far. Whilst I waited for the glue in the panels to set, I could start work on the framework. I ripped some more of the same material down, this time to 4 cm, so I can get 2 bits out of each board. Then I swap out the blade in the table saw to my 5mm grooving blade. Like normal, links down below to the tools I use. Using a jig to help hold the pieces, I then pass all those bits through, cutting a 5mm groove in the bottom of them. After the first pass, I flip it round and put it back through so that the groove will be perfectly centred. Actually, I didn't put a groove in all the pieces. I kept 4 back, and these are going to be the face frame. This is going to get joined together with pocket holes, so I clamp my jig on and get these holes drilled in all 4 corners. Then I can use the clamp to hold the joint together and get it all screwed up. This joint will never be seen again as it's going to go up against that frame. With that done, I can set the miter saw to 45 degrees and cut all the joints to make the side panel and the doors. I start with getting the side panel put together, so I get it laid out and then measure how big the panel is going to need to be to go in it. I made these a bit oversized, so now I can rip them down on the table saw and cut them to length on the miter saw. I do exactly the same thing for the 2 doors, and then I can give everything a sand down. I don't want to glue the panel in, I'm just going to glue up the miters. I'm going to come back and reinforce them later, but for now I'm just getting some PVA on, getting it all put together, and then I can use my Veritas clamp to hold it all together and check that everything is square. I do exactly the same thing for the 2 doors. When the glue's dried, it's time to reinforce these miters, So I get this clamped down to the bench. Then I use my biscuit jointer to cut a slot. I'm just using this little 45 to help line it up. I've got a jig for the table saw to cut splines, but these panels are going to be far too big for that. I did look at making a jig for the biscuit joiner, but for something flat like this, there's really no need. I ripped down some wood to the correct size to fit in the splines. Then I can cut out some little triangular pieces on the bandsaw. I get some wood glue squeezed into the gaps and then get the splines pushed into place. When the glue's had a chance to go off, I can then use a Japanese pull saw to cut everything flush and then give everything a final sand down. I can now get the doors fitted into the face frame, and I'm going to use some flush mount hinges. I watched a great video by Peter Millard from the 10-minute workshop on how to install these, so if you're using them, I'd go and watch that. I need a way to attach this to the frame I've made, and there's not going to be enough room to go from the inside, so I'm drilling a series of countersunk holes through it. I can then take everything back inside, get it into place, and held up with a few clamps. Now I can drive some screws through those countersinked holes into the framework. I do this for the side panel and for the face frame, and I've taken the doors off to get this all installed, so I got them put back on. One thing I forgot to do while I was in the workshop was install the handles, so I drill a hole in each door, get a bolt in, and then these little brass knobs go on. I needed to fill all those holes that the screws went in, so I used a plug cutter in the drill press to drill out a load of holes in the same wood. Then I could take it over to the bandsaw and cut those plugs out. Back in the house again, I get a dab of glue in each hole, get a plug in and get it tapped into place. These then just need sanding flat. Now I'm not going to apply any finish to this cabinet because I just don't know what colour I want, so I'm going to live with it for a while and think about it. One last job was to install some magnetic catches at the top and the bottom for each door, and that's it all done. It is certainly not perfect, but I'm not very experienced doing cabinets, and the best way to learn is always just by doing it. Thanks for watching, thanks to my Patreons, and please subscribe for more videos.